Hello, my name is Evan Garcia, and you are listening to the Lakers Takes podcast. This is episode 0, and if you're listening to this, you are officially an OG. You are a real one. You are a day one, not even day one. You are day 0. You are here with me coming in on the ground floor, and I appreciate you. I'm so excited. I've been thinking about doing this for over a year now, and it's finally time. The season's about to start, and it's time to launch the Lakers Takes podcast. I know what you're thinking. Another Lakers podcast? And you're right. There's a lot of Lakers podcasts. I looked it up on Google earlier. I know my Twitter said that this was the first Lakers podcast ever, but I was kind of lying there. There was a few, and I looked it up to see what the number was. And let me pull it up here. It's actually 52 million Lakers podcasts. That's right. There are 52 million Lakers podcasts. Of course, I'm just kidding, but you know what? That's a lot of podcasts, and there are a lot of podcasts. But you know what else is also a fact? None of them have me on it. None of them having me on it. I'm not talking on any of those podcasts, and I felt that I needed to do this. And I think when you feel like you need to do something, that's when it's the right time, it's the right thing. You should go out there and do it. And I feel like I need to do this. So I want to talk about why I feel that need and what you get out of listening to me talk about the Lakers. So let's get into it. Now, when it comes to my history with the game of basketball, it's really quite rich. I started watching basketball. My earliest memory watching the NBA was when I was 4 years old in 1992. Now, you can do the math there, try to figure out what my age is from that information, but that was my first memory, very, very young. I remember watching the Bulls beating the Portland Trail Blazers and repeating, seeing the confetti come down, and that was my earliest basketball memory. I don't remember much else during that year. Obviously, I was 4 years old, but it's the earliest basketball memory that I have. And, as long as I can remember from that moment, and probably before and definitely after, I was always watching basketball. Basketball for me was never a casual thing. It was something I was obsessed with. Always obsessed with. From day one, from the jump, I was watching every amount of minute of basketball I could in the 90s. And, it was the first thing in my life that I truly wanted to be great in. I wanted to be the best. I wanted to know more and more. And, just like many people, I had dreams of being an NBA player and being a basketball player. And that's what I focused on from, being a toddler until around high school, when that dream kind of eventually died, because turns out I'm 5'7", and turns out even though I thought I was working hard, I wasn't working as hard as I needed to maybe try to achieve those dreams. Now, with my physical limitations and things, I don't think I could really make the NBA. There's only a few outliers like Muggsy Bogues and Boykins, that at my height, Isaiah Thomas, shout out to IT. So I don't think I was going to be one of those unicorns, but, I think if I would have applied myself more and understood even more what hard work was really about, maybe I could have, gotten a D3 scholarship or something like that. I do think that was something that would have been possible had I applied myself even more. But I did apply myself as much as, I thought I should be. And I worked really hard on my love for the game and understanding of the game, learning plays. I used to borrow books from the library on coaching basketball so I could learn more about, well, if the coaches are teaching this, I would be the player executing on it and that kind of thing. I was just an absolute basketball nerd from the jump, unapologetically, and that knowledge is what helps me today with all the information I have, encyclopedic information from, really the 90s until now. And obviously I've done my research on the 80s and 70s, but it's always a little disconnected because, I didn't grow up with it. I wasn't able to watch it day to day at scale the way I have from the 90s up to this point. As a basketball fan, I feel really blessed because I saw all of Jordan's years from like 95 until he finished, and I saw all of Kobe's career, of course, and all of LeBron. So it's really been a blessing that, I've been able to watch all the greats kind of go through their ups and downs in their career, and I've been able to experience it. It's really amazing. And obviously, not all the greats when I say those ones, but kind of the greats of my generation, right? And some of my greats are the ones people talk about when they talk about the all-time ones, So I find that to be a blessing. And again, I want to be a person, even though we're going to look at things mainly through a Lakers lens, and I think that's the way I want to look at things, and that's why I'm making a Lakers podcast and not an NBA podcast. But we do want to acknowledge, and I want to acknowledge that, you should be appreciating all the greats and all the legends, because it's a joy to see this game played at the highest level and learn what that means and how that changes decade by decade, generation by generation. So that's been awesome. And that's kind of a bit of my knowledge and my background watching the NBA. But does that make me qualified to talk to you? You're going to have to decide for yourself. But I do want to talk to you a little bit about the things I've done that maybe can convince you that, hey, I want to stick around and listen to this Lakers Takes podcast. This Edwin guy, kind of knows what he's talking about. So essentially, around 2019, my passion for basketball was growing at a really, really big rate. I went from just a super fan that was extremely knowledgeable to a person who wanted to be a little bit more active and more of a participant in the sport. And the way I wanted to do that was through writing. All through college and through my life, I've been a writer. I've been a person who loves to write and break down and express their feelings and explain why this movie's good and why this book is great and things of that nature. Music, I did a lot of music, writing and blogging back in the day when I was also doing music as a primary job when I was a musician. So I did all those things, and I was always writing about the things that I was passionate about, the things I cared about. So naturally, in 2019, when my passion for basketball reached kind of a critical point, I really felt like I needed to write about basketball. And actually, I started writing about the WNBA. After the Lakers season was over in 2019 and it ended disappointingly, I kind of was still hungry for basketball. I'm like, I don't want this to end, but the season's over. And then I realized, hey, the WNBA season's going on. Maybe I should give that league a try. And when I tried to just with an open mind watch WNBA, I instantly fell in love with it, and I just went, WNBA crazy, almost the same way that I'm NBA crazy, right? And I was watching all the games, and I applied to be the beat writer for the Chicago Sky for this website called W Insider, which just covers the women's game. And luckily, they took a chance on me. They gave me kind of a sample test and an article to write, and I'm like, you know what? I haven't done this, but it's gonna sound weird, but I'm really good at it. I know I'm already kind of good at it now. And they were like, well, you write us something, and we'll see. And I wrote it. They're like, okay, yeah. You showed you got the chops to do this. Why don't we kind of bring you along? And I covered the Sky from 2019, and I still do. Now I do it independently, and I also do partnerships with SB Nation affiliated website Swish Appeal. So I write for them there, and I do some more WNBA stuff at large. But I never stopped kind of writing from 2019 to now. And that's only been a couple years, but like I said, it's been intense. And with the knowledge I already have and the writing skills I already have, it's just really worked out well. And it's really shown that I have the chops for this, and I have the knowledge for this, and I can articulate what I know and express it to everyone else. And that's really what I've been doing from 2019. It started with just the Chicago Sky, kind of expanded a little bit to WNBA at large and women's basketball, especially the Olympics. I did a lot of coverage about the Olympic team, and of course the Lakers, which is what we're here to talk about mainly. When with the Lakers, that really started last year when I launched Lakers-Takes.com. It was a site that I created that gave you news articles, feature articles, and also a YouTube channel, eCreates88, which is where this podcast will also be in video form. So if you want to see how ridiculous my hair looks right now compared to my images on Twitter, go check it out. You might be shocked at how my hair looks right now because it's rather curly and wild. That's when I really started covering the Lakers in 2020. And like I said, that's been something that has really grown amazingly, with the Twitter account and the YouTube channel, my TikTok page, which is at over 4K, and the Lakers Takes website, which is getting thousands and thousands of views, which I'm really grateful for, and love the feedback that I'm getting on the coverage I'm doing there, the news articles, the feature articles. It's really been a joy, and honestly, the last couple years have been some of the happiest moments in my life, covering this sport, covering this Lakers team, and exploring it with all of you and learning from all the other content creators like Laker Film Room and the things happening at SB Nation and Silver Screen and Roll, and the things happening on all the different big sites like Bleacher Report, etc., etc. It's been really great, and I'm just so excited to launch this podcast today and talk about the Lakers on a consistent, regular basis. So that's a little bit of my resume here. I know this ain't an interview, but some of you may maybe never really heard me talk or really know my whole story. You just see me tweet about the Lakers and, follow me, and that's great. That's cool. But like I said, I'm constantly writing articles, constantly making videos, and now I'll be consistently and constantly making this podcast. So let's talk about it a little bit here and talk about what the podcast is really going to be about. Okay, so the Lakers Takes podcast is going to be a roughly 30-minute podcast when I'm by myself. I'm going to have some guests every now and then, and I already have a few lined up and have a few more I want to reach out to. So I'm really excited about that, and we'll have guests regularly. I don't know how regularly yet because I'm just kind of building this up. I'm guessing about once a month, so maybe once every 4 or 5 episodes I will have a guest on. And when I have a guest, we'll go a little bit longer. We'll go an hour because we'll have a conversation. We'll go through all the things that I'm going to explain right now in the rundown of what the Lakers Takes podcast is going to have. And I want to give them room to speak and room to kind of talk with me and maybe even have a different perspective than I do. You know, sometimes people disagree with me. Another reason why I created this podcast is a lot of times when I listen to other podcasts, I'm like, you know, screaming in my car, like, no, you're wrong. Like, that's not how you look at this. It's like this. This is why they're doing this. So this is why this works. This is why this doesn't work. And, you know, I'm sure a lot of people listen to podcasts probably have had that feeling before. Maybe you've even had it with me. And, you know, I want to, you know, kind of put my voice out there and talk about why I see the game the way I see it and why I think that's a good way to see it and what I learned watching all the film that I watch and watching all the basketball that I watch and all the Lakers basketball in particular. You know, I really just kind of stay locked in on Lakers in terms of the men's game, and with the women's game I watch a bit more, but when it comes to men, it really is mainly just the Lakers and watching a couple of the main teams that I think, you know, might be a threat to end their season, and that's kind of how I look at it. But anyway, for the rundown, I'm going to go through what the typical episode's like so you can kind of get an idea of what it's going to provide and how it might be different from other podcasts. So every podcast is going to start off recapping the games that happened the week prior. So for example, the podcast will be releasing every Monday. So next week on Monday, we're going to immediately start talking about the very first Lakers preseason game, which is happening on Sunday against the Brooklyn Nets and the Los Angeles Lakers. So once that game's over, I'll start recording the pod and I'll talk about and break down what's happening there. As we go along in the season, as you can imagine, there'll be weeks when there's 3, 4, hopefully not 5 games. That happened a couple times last year. That was insane. Hopefully we don't get that many games a week because that's just, I think, too much basketball, even for professional players to play. But we'll recap the games. That segment will probably go about 10, 15 minutes, depending on how many games there were, what I want to say about them, what I think was important. But they'll be like nice little recaps. So what I like about this idea is if you just listen to this podcast, you'll know pretty much everything that's kind of going on with the team. So we'll go over the games and kind of recap that. And through that, we'll recap any kind of news that matters to the games, right? Injuries that happen, you know, conversations that happened, anything that's kind of impacted the game based on the, you know, the stories that have come out through that week. So that's kind of where we'll wrap all those things up. And then in the second segment, the kind of larger segment of the podcast, we're going to talk about kind of a big idea, a big concept that I've explored on the website, LakersTakes.com. So on LakersTakes.com, the way the website usually works, in case you haven't really been on it recently or you haven't kind of noticed the cadence of it, every week I do a weekly news roundup where I just kind of take the biggest news stories and wrap them up there, right? And every week I also do one feature article. And in the feature article, I talk about, you know, just kind of a bigger concept at large that I feel like needs to be addressed or talked about on the Lakers. You know, I can just make up some kind of hypothetical ones that could come up this season. It could be something like why DeAndre Jordan needs to start, right? And maybe I see something in how the lineup's going and he's not starting. I think actually kind of a hot take, but I think he needs to start. And then I break down why I think he needs to start, why I think the starter we have isn't really, you know, working perfectly in that exact role that they have. And I can talk about it kind of, you know, deeper conversation, a little bit longer than, you know, a Twitter, you know, thread or something like that. And we're going to talk about it, break down my points and my reasons. Or it could be something like why the Lakers are getting out rebounded every game. And, you know, it could be a trend that I see and now I want to talk about it and we'll break down, you know, what kind of rebounds they're losing, you know, why they're losing the battle, how that's impacting the game, etc. So those are the kinds of feature articles I do once a week on Lakers Takes when the season is going on. And of course, the season is just about to start, so that'll be ramping up to consistently once a week. So on the podcast, we're going to actually talk about that concept and kind of break down those kinds of ideas and go a little bit deeper than even the article does, where the article is usually around 700 to 1,000 words, which is, you know, maybe 5-6 minutes of reading time. Now we'll have 10-15 minutes to talk about it and really break it down and kind of, you know, not ramble, but kind of explore it a little bit deeper and a little bit longer than we would in an article, because it's going to be just me talking and not writing down, editing, kind of trying to trim the fat there. We can kind of just really break it all down and see the pros and cons of whatever the situations are that come up. Hopefully there are a lot of good situations, but obviously we don't know because we haven't actually kicked off any basketball at the time of this recording. So that'll be the main segment, kind of talking about the big topic that was explored on the website the week prior. And then the final segment, last 10-15 minutes or so, that's where we're going to preview the games coming up. We're going to talk about the matchups they have, I'll make sure I give you the dates and the times and, talk about where the challenges are and what the schedule looks like for the upcoming week. So I think that's going to be a really good flow for this podcast. About, like I said, about 30 minutes or so, each segment getting about 10 minutes and kind of exploring it through there. And yeah, hopefully everyone likes that. I'm definitely open to hearing feedback, especially once we actually start applying this, which will be next week. That's why this is podcast 0. This is kind of just the intro and telling you what's going to go down. Next week, I won't have all this talking. We're just going to jump right into the topics and get into a good flow. So hopefully you enjoy it. And I'm definitely eager to hear people's opinions on how the podcast sounds once we get into the initial podcast episode 1 and then kind of take things from there. So I'm open to changing things, but right now that's kind of the structure and format we're going to go with to start. All right, I just have a couple more things I want to talk about. Hopefully everything you've heard so far is like, yeah, that sounds pretty good. Let me just subscribe to the podcast and let's give it a shot. And I really hope you'll give me a shot because I think I have something to give and something to say. But I want to just mention a couple more things here before we wrap it up. So one thing is I want to talk about my relationship with the Lakers because I think that one's really unique. I didn't start off as a hardcore Lakers fan. Remember, that first memory, it's a Bulls memory. I'm a Chicagoan. That's where I was born and raised. And that was the team, the Chicago Bulls was the team that I watched when I was a child. That was the team I grew up with in the city that I grew up in. And essentially what happened was when I was in college, again, I went to college for music. I mentioned before I was a musician, and I am a musician or was a musician. I don't know, you can decide how you want to look at that. But I went to college for music. And if you ever seen the movie Whiplash, it's an exaggeration, but it's an exaggeration based on real life. And the music school is rough in college. And it was so rough that I gave up everything. I didn't watch really TV anymore. I didn't watch movies. I didn't play video games. I didn't watch basketball. The thing that I've told you I'm so obsessed over and so focused on, I let it all go to go out and do my best in the music world, in the college music world. And that's what happened. And during that time, I didn't watch the Bulls. I didn't really watch anything. I missed like a couple years because it wasn't my whole college career, but it was like, the big part, especially in the beginning. So I didn't watch a lot of basketball, and I stopped watching everybody. I didn't watch anything. And then as I was kind of wrapping up college and getting free of all that drama, Kobe's career was ending. And like I said, I've always been a fan of the game, so I've known all of Kobe's career. I've watched all those playoff series and etc., even though I wasn't a fan because I was a fan of the sport. And I knew his career was ending, once the Achilles happened. I was making sure I was watching as much as I could just because I knew it was wrapping up. And as that was happening, I really made sure I watched every game. And slowly I went from, hey, I'm just kind of watching one of the legends go away to me kind of becoming a Lakers fan. It was kind of an accident. It just kind of happened. Also, I was interested in moving to Los Angeles. I was starting to think about that. I have family here in Los Angeles. Every time I visit, it's just awesome. So things were kind of pointing to me towards LA, pointing to me towards the Lakers, and things kind of slowly happened. And I think one thing that really kind of sped it up was that a couple seasons where I watched, every Lakers game and watched Kobe and started to learn more about the Lakers culture and really the fan base. Anyone who's listening to this, the Lakers fan base, they get a lot of, shots thrown at them online, and they throw some shots too, I'm not going to lie. But the one thing about them is they're loyal, they're loving, and they're open. When I came in, I still remember tweeting people like, hey, I'm not exactly a Lakers fan, but I can see Kobe's career is going to end. Like, who should I follow to know more about the team? People were automatically tweeting me, follow this person, follow Harrison, follow Laker Film Room, check out this website, check out, this article, these are the people, check out Darius. And I was like, wow, I asked such a simple question and I got so many good responses. And, when I was part of, kind of Bulls Nation, I didn't get those responses. I would try to talk to people and nobody wanted to talk to me. Some of my favorite podcasts on the Bulls died and just gave up and quit. And it was like, it just felt like I was kind of by myself on a sinking ship. And then with the Lakers, even though they were having their worst seasons, record-wise, the fan base was warm and welcoming. And I was like, I was open about, hey, I'm not a fan, but I want to watch more of the games. Like, what should I do? And who should be the people I listen to? And it was always so warm and welcoming. And slowly but surely, it just started becoming a love that grew organically during those kind of bad years of the team. I was having fun watching, Jordan Clarkson and Lance and D'Angelo Russell, and obviously when Lonzo got there, it got really exciting and things like that. And slowly I just became a Laker fan, and then I moved to LA, and then now I still, live in Los Angeles, and it's just went from, just trying to watch the end of Kobe's career to now I'm in it. And now look at me, I'm starting a podcast. I've changed careers. I'm no longer, working on music and focusing on music. I'm focusing on my journalism, my writing, my video production, all those kinds of things. And it's just been insane. It's just, life can be so crazy, but I've always just listened to my heart, listened to my gut, and my heart and my gut have been telling me for years, and maybe since I was a child, honestly, that this is what I need to be doing, that I need to be in sports, I need to be in basketball. And I couldn't do it the way maybe I wanted to or the way that I thought I would, but here I am talking about the game, and I have a lot to say, and hopefully you like hearing it and you want to interact with me. So again, if you've already watched up to here, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Again, this is Lakers Takes episode 0. We're just starting off, and this is going to be going on all year long. I'm not one of those people who start something up and you're gonna say, oh, he'll go for it podcast, and then when the views are low, he'll quit. No, I'm here if we have a 10,000 viewers, 1,000 viewers, 5 viewers. I'm gonna be consistent. I'm gonna show up every week, and I'm gonna give to this sport and to this community just like it gave to me, because y'all have been amazing for me and amazing to me this entire time, and I'm just here to spread that love and to keep on going. And that's what I love about covering basketball and covering the Lakers, is that the more I dig, I get all that back. I get it all back when I watch game after game and tape after tape and replay after replay. I learn more about the game, and my love grows, and I get more excited, and I get smarter about the game, and then I can share it with people and talk with people a little bit more educated than I could before I did those things. And it's just been amazing, and I would just love to share that knowledge I have with you, and also talk with you, because I'll get stuff wrong sometimes too. That's part of it, right? If I knew every single thing that was going to happen in every single game, and I was always perfect, then I should be hired as a consultant or something, because clearly, there's something I know that's kind of weird, right? So I'm not trying to come off as like the most supreme being expert, but also I'm not going to be fake humble either. I think I'm really good. I work really hard at this, and I'm only going to get better. So yeah, I know what I'm talking about, and it comes from a place of reason. It comes from a place of education, and it comes from a place of, me having the knowledge and using that knowledge to work on it, even if I'm not going to get everything right, because no one gets everything right. But hopefully that excites you. Hopefully you're down to support me. And like I said, this podcast will be available on all streaming platforms. Apple Podcasts is the only one that's a little finicky. I've done other podcasts. I have a one on the Chicago Sky called Sky and the Shy. And with Apple, sometimes they get a little weird with when they actually approve it. There might be a bit of a delay. But everything else, it should be available for. If when I tweet this out, or when you hear about this podcast, if somehow it's not on your preferred platform, just let me know. I have pretty easy access to all platforms and being able to put it on there. Maybe I just accidentally skipped it and didn't notice that was something people wanted. But for the most part, it's going to be on every single thing. So just let me know. Tweet at me, message me, whatever you need to do to contact me to let me know, hey, I want it on this and it's not there. Can you put it on there? I'll make sure I do everything in my power to make that happen. That's enough of me rambling on for almost half an hour here on episode 0, but I'm glad I was able to share a little bit more about my life, why this podcast exists, what the podcast is actually going to sound like when we actually get into real games. And like I said, that's going to start next Monday, episode 1, after the very first preseason game. So if you listen this far, make sure you've downloaded the podcast. Make sure you're listening to it on whatever platform, and tell a friend. I would really appreciate it. We're starting here on ground zero, and if you want to listen a little, I need you a lot. So thank you so much, and I really appreciate it. And also, if you want to be a guest, if you just want to talk about the game, I'm not going to guarantee that I'll have you on the pod, but I'll guarantee I'll check you out and see if you can do it. You don't have to be this super uber professional. I am going to have some people kind of on that range, but I'm also going to have some super fans and some people who I just feel like, hey, you can talk and not be a knucklehead. You know the game. We can talk about it, and I want your perspective. So if you're even just curious, or even just kind of want to see if I would be interested in having you on the pod, go ahead and tweet at me. Go ahead and DM me. My DMs are open. You can also email me on my Twitter account. I have the Lakers Takes Gmail there. So there's plenty of ways to contact me. Just let me know, and I'll see what I can do. And I'm pretty open to having different type of guests on. So don't reject yourself before I reject you. Just go ahead and reach out, and we'll see what happens. Last thing, and this will be for the people who listen or watch on YouTube. Actually, I'm wearing the Golden Knight Lakers shirt. It's a little too low here, so I'm gonna kind of let it zoom in. And again, Golden Knight makes some of the best Lakers merch, period, on planet Earth. So make sure you check out his merch whenever he drops it. He kind of does like this high fashion thing, so not everything's available, including this shirt. I thought it would be in the frame, but I see that it kind of doesn't get in there, so kind of wanted just to show it there. And give him a shout out as well, because he makes, you know, some incredible clothes. So I'll be rocking a lot of Lakers gear here on the pod, and I'll be sure to shout out the creators who are independent, who make those kind of things, and make sure y'all know, you know, not only what's going on with the team, but what's going on with the culture, and Golden Knight's 100% part of that culture. All right, so that's the end of the podcast, episode 0. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll be back next Monday for the very first podcast of the Lakers Takes podcast, where we'll talk about the Lakers versus the Brooklyn Nets preseason game. We'll talk about that. We'll also talk about all the news that happens on Media Day and all that hoopla. Hopefully there's not any negative headlines that come out of that, but we'll see what happens. And I'm really curious to see what we're going to see during that first preseason game, and I'm going to have an article out about the things I'm looking for during the preseason. I think this is one of the biggest preseasons the Lakers have had because of all the new faces and the dynamics and where LeBron is in his career. And I'm going to write a kind of full-length feature article on that. And once I write that out, we're going to talk about it here on the podcast next week. And we're going to explore that idea and see, what are you looking forward to in the preseason? What are you curious about? Make sure you tweet at me about those things, and I'll see if I can get it on the pod. That's it for me. Thank you for listening to the Lakers Takes podcasts. Have a great day, and go Lakers.